Welcome to Nifty 50 Photographers, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to photograph an interior. Now if you're looking to make money out of your photography, then photographing stuff for real estate, estate agents, holiday lets is a great way to get started, and it's a good source of regular income. It's one I use. In fact, I've in this last month photographed over 35 houses. So shows you there's quite a lot of work out there, especially with estate agency moving to a lot of online agents. They often want a freelancer in a local area to help take photographs of properties as they take them onto their portfolio. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up the room so it looks nice for photographing. I'll show you where to position your camera, what camera settings you need, and we'll take some nice photographs of my kitchen. Let me show you around the room. There's a big set of windows and French doors here at one end. And then as we pan round, see there's some nice worktops. Over here is the sink area. And over here we have the cooker and another doorway. And finally on this other wall we have some feature shelves and this nice copper table. Now there's a few things I'm thinking about as I'm looking around the room, and the first of all is I'm thinking about the lighting, and I've noticed that over in this corner here it's a darker area, so that's something that I need to be conscious of when I'm photographing it. And in contrast to that, when I look the other way in the room, the big window area is obviously letting in a lot of light. So I've got a very bright area, very dark area, so I need to be conscious of my exposure, that I'm not going to blow my highlights when I'm doing a view looking towards the window, and that it's not going to look very underexposed if I do a view looking towards this doorway. The next thing I'm thinking about is how to set up the room. There are a few things that I spotted as I walked in the room because I've done this so many times. The first thing is there's a dog bed and feeding bowls here. Now there's something that estate agents would want you to remove. Looking further round, there's a tea towel hanging over the cooker. Now these can stay, especially if they're very nice ones. In this case it's not a particularly attractive one. It's also, as a word of warning, they're very difficult to get looking really nice. They've got to be recently ironed, and they've got to be hanging perfectly straight to look good. Now over by the sink area there are some more issues. First of all, the washing up liquid, that needs to be moved along with the washing up brush. Now you can sometimes hide these in the sink because it's deep enough to not show up in your camera. But over here we can see there is a toaster with a wire. Now wires on appliances are one of the real challenges when you're photographing real estate. Inevitably they're always black against white or silver. This is against a silver background, and you need to tuck them out of sight. One other final thing, in this corner we have a bin, and estate agents will nearly always ask you to take the bin out of your shots. Now that I've gone around the room and I've identified all those problems, I'm going to tuck them out of sight and decide where I'm going to take my photos from as the next step. So the next thing to do is decide on your angles and how you're going to show the room. Now for a room like this, a kitchen, it's quite a key feature room of a house often. It certainly is in this case. So estate agents would be expecting you to take 2, probably 3 shots to show it from different angles. The first angle I've chosen is from here. The reason for that is get a good view of the large range cooker, which is probably an interesting feature for prospective buyers. And it also shows a good overall view, all the worktops and the storage space, all the cupboards that are available. One of the reasons I've chosen this location is it's the doorway, and it's the first doorway that somebody would use as they came into the house for the first time. So it's their first view of the kitchen. So this is very much like a prospective viewer would experience. They'd come through this door behind me and get this view of the kitchen. So I'm replicating that in the photograph, and that has some emotional trigger as well for them, because they're now seeing what they expect. They've seen it in the photograph, they've walked into the room, and it looks just like they've seen in the photos. So we've made that emotional connection for them. You could open the doorway behind me as well if you want to get your camera a little bit further back, just to get a wider view. I've got a 12 to 24 lens on here, and I'm going to set this at about 16 millimeters. I've got a full frame camera. If you're using a crop sensor camera, I'd recommend you use a lens that's something like 10 to 20 millimeters and set it at 10, and then you get a nice wide view of the room. Normally for a full frame camera, I wouldn't recommend going much wider than 16 because you start to make the room look unnaturally large. You get slightly a bit of a distorted view of it, and that can make rooms look bigger than they really are, which might be a bit off-putting to people viewing the photos. There are occasions where I will bend that rule, particularly if you're photographing a small, for example, an ensuite bathroom, and you're really trying to show as much as you can of the room, then you might go wider. And for my camera settings now, I'm going to take them all on the same setting. I'm going to take them all at f8. I can set aperture priority because that'll probably do a good job. I'll use a focus, a small spot to focus on, and I'll focus at least a third of the way into the room. Now what I'm looking for is the camera to get the exposure right. Now if you remember from some of my earlier videos, the thing about that is you want to find something that is mid-grey, so try and choose something that is that kind of colour, or at least that level of brightness. So don't choose the brightest area of the room like a window, and don't choose the darkest area, one that's in shadow. Try and find one that's in between, put your focus point on that, and use that to measure your exposure from, and then it should get a pretty good balanced exposure. In a room like this where you've got big windows and areas in the shadow, then you might need to go to HDR, so that's a bracketed shot. What I'd recommend for that is you do 2 exposures under, one that's set at the normal exposure and one that's set at 2 exposures over. And I'll do that for one of my other shots just to show you the point. And it's really going to depend on the quality of your camera, how good its low light sensor is, as to whether you need to do that. And we'll cover that in the second part of this video when I talk about processing. But you should be able to set that up on most cameras to do that bracketed shot, so that you can get that final image that looks correctly exposed. Now let's move to another location, take a second shot. My second shot, I've decided to come to the corner right in the French windows, because it gives me a good view of the whole of the kitchen. Shows a nice feature shelving, still get a nice view of the cooker as well. And this is where I take my second shot from. Again, I would use the same settings, f8 on my camera, aperture priority. There is one other thing you need to be conscious of when you're taking interior photos, and that is to be able to keep all the angles looking correct. So the verticals need to be vertical and the horizontals need to be horizontal. And you do that by making sure your camera is perfectly level. Now, as you can see, I've got it mounted on a tripod. The tripod is at about chest height for me. So about something around 3 to 4 feet, 1 to 1.5 meters is about right. If you want a rough guide, you want to make sure it's higher than perhaps a chair back or your tabletop or your worktops, a little bit higher than that. But it'll depend slightly on the room. If you've got a very small room, you might want to go a bit lower just to get a bit more in the frame. But do use something like a level, or if your camera has the opportunity to display if it's level, make sure that it's not tilted up or down, that it's lying perfectly straight, and make sure it's not tilted in the horizontal axis either. So that way you'll ensure that all the things in your walls and your cupboards and stuff that should be straight do come out straight. Now for another shot, I want to do some views looking towards those big French windows. So I've got a choice of being in this corner or the other one. And it's really a question of probably just standing in them and deciding which one you like the best. Now, if I stand in this corner, I'm actually looking at that feature shelving again. And I took that from the other corner over there, so I'm less inclined to take this one. I've also got this post that's right in front of me, and I think that's a little distracting. It's going to be quite dominant in the photo. So my preference will be to do it from the other corner, but I think you would also get quite a nice shot from this. You might want to take it just to give the agent some options. One other word of caution I want to give you, and that is look out for reflective surfaces. Microwaves are a classic example, as they've got a shiny glass door, and the same with this extractor hood. And the reason for that, it's very easy to get yourself caught as a reflection in those. If I just move a little bit, you'll see what I mean. You should see me now waving in that microwave door. So you need to make sure your sets are slightly further back or out of the area that you're going to get reflected in. Choose your angles carefully to avoid that. For my final shot, I put myself down in this little dark space. I've got the advantage of being able to get further back because there's no worktop in front of me. I'm getting a nice view out towards those big windows, getting all the storage cupboards as well, so it's giving a good overview of the kitchen. Now, this is one shot you might want to consider doing a bracketed shot from, because those windows really are a bright scene, or a bright part of the scene. And as I've moved to this area of the room over by the sink, then it's going to look quite a bit darker. There's a good chance to bracket it. But if your camera has got good low light sensitivity, then you'll get away with probably just one shot if you choose the right point to focus on. I'm probably going to focus towards the worktops over on this side. And these are what my 3 shots have come out like. I'm very pleased with the results. That's how I photograph a room interior. So just to summarize, it's a question of clearing away any unwanted items. It's about choosing your angles so you show the key features of the room. And then it's about balancing your exposure so you don't blow out your highlights and you bring up the things in the shadows. Now, of course, you can do a lot of that in post-processing. And that's what I'm going to show you in my next video. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you get to see that. I'll be making that next week as part 2 of this. And if you have enjoyed this video, please remember to give it a like, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.